Man, this year has been a crazy one for me in my hitless journey so far. I went from announcing that I was going to take a chill pill from challenge runs to getting 7 no-hit runs in the span of 3.5 months. That meant I gotta run every 2 weeks. I was on a roll. And with Replicant and Village around the corner, I wanted to see how far I could push it. So I decided to accept the challenge and attempt to get no-hit run on both games within 2 weeks each. But certainly, I didn't expect what the games had in store for me. This is how it all went down. It was April 23, New Replicant just released, and I was coming in fresh on a 5-day hiatus of no-hit runs after getting Hotline Miami no-hit on April 18. I previously had announced that I was going all in on Replicant to see if I could beat it in 2 weeks, and cut more than half of the time frame I had for Nier Automata, which was achieved in 1 month and 2 weeks. So I immediately loaded up the game and started my first playthrough. Usually, when going all in, I take notes and try to get a feel for how I know hit will look like as I'm playing the game. While doing the playthrough, I encounter a few red flags which I wrote down to tackle them as soon as I was done with the game. On the second day of me streaming Replicant, I was done with my playthrough, and this time I decided to record my total playtime so I can subtract that from the total time it would take me to get the run. And as I feared, it took me 18 hours to complete ending A only. 18 hours. 18 hours. Now, the way I get estimates of how long a run could take to do is by either cutting in half my total playtime or by doubling the time of a glitchless speedrun. Considering that I'm not a speedrunner, this meant that Nier Replicant will take me roughly 8 to 9 hours to complete. So after doing notes, writing everything, practicing bosses, and going for my first attempt, as I predicted, my run clocked in at 8 hours. Oh my god, almost 9 hours. 8 hours for me was a no-no. I've never been a big fan of long runs, mainly because with long runs, I can either do 1 attempt or practice per day. So I worked on the route a bit more to remove unnecessary detour, memorize all the objectives so I wouldn't waste time figuring where to go, and learned that you could mount a bull to move from area to area much quicker. All of this reduced my time by 1 hour and 20 minutes, and progressively got shorter and shorter as I did my runs. Now this was more doable in my eyes. With time out of the way, all that was left is to perfect the splits and get the run. That said though, a 6-hour run is not what I expected. When I set my goals for getting the run in 14 days, I was expecting a sub 4-hour run. I've never done a run this long, much less get a no-hit run in 14 days. Suddenly, getting the run seemed like a far-fetched goal for me. Still, I decided to push through and see how far I could take it. Now before I continue, let me explain how no-hit works. While a no-hit run can resemble a no-damage run in the naked eye, it actually is a bit more complex. The premise is to get from point A to point B without taking a hit from an enemy or a trap. What constitutes as a hit is an instance of damage or hard CC. This means that self-harm or environmental damage does not count as a hit since the source of damage did not come from an enemy or a trap. But any form of stagger, stun, or grab that comes from an enemy will invalidate the run even if it doesn't do damage. If we get hit, we have to restart the game from the beginning and do it all over again. So have that in mind. Now with the first attempt done, I set my goals towards perfecting the strats with the bosses of the first half of the game. Hansel, Gretel, Kaine, and Hook were pretty easy bosses to deal with. I found out that most of the enemies in this game, including bosses, didn't have an attack that could cover their back. For Hansel and Gretel to be able to attack me, they had to look at me. So by continuously staying on their back, I never had to worry about them. For Kaine and Hook, all I did was shoot from a distance and it was done deal for them. Gepetto, being a sequential boss fight, didn't give me too much trouble either, although those lasers always kept me in check. It only took 1 hit of those lasers to keep me stressed every time I went for this fight. By the way, Gepetto looks like a mech version of Iroh from the Mario series. Just putting it out there. Let me know what you think. The second Hook fight is where things got a little bit more difficult. There were moments where I had to dodge shockwaves and projectiles, plus the game introduced me to arguably the most annoying enemy I had to deal with in the whole run. Barrier Shades. Gone were the days where I could just mindlessly shoot everything with Dark Blast. Now the only option were to use lance or melee them, so I choose the latter. As for Hook, shockwaves, projectiles, and tail attacks were all in the table for the boss, so I couldn't attack mindlessly. But then I found this. To Turns out, there isn't an invisible wall preventing you from leaving the arena in all 3 of Hook's phases. So, in cheesy fashion, I proceeded to use Dark Blast against Hook from a distance and wrote him off from the checklist. Charizard. Anyways, this was another boss that had me on the edge. I started out with Dark Blast, but later switched to Lance after finding out that Lance one-shots the cubes, making the first phase much quicker and safer. Second phase was the easiest since all I had to do was slash 4 blocks from each arm. The third phase is the one that had me worried the most, but later I figured out that Dark Blast charge attack worked perfectly, so I didn't have to aim at the weak spots as much. Easy peasy. On Grimoire Rubrum, I got memed on a couple times by the pages, but nothing too scary. All it took was Dark Blast to keep the pages at bay, which was not too difficult to do. Jack of Hearts, yeah, not much to say about that. Grimoire Noir, being the last boss of the first half, was just a harder version of Rubrum, so I give him respect to avoid the memes. For the second batch of bosses, I did my fair amount of practice but didn't put as much attention to them. Except for Louise, which was my main concern early on. Anyways, this is how the second run went. 2, 3. Nice. Perfect. Alright, 11 hits is the new PB. I had lowered my personal best by more than a third from my previous run, which was a big improvement and a bit unexpected in my eyes. I only got hit on 4 splits, which was my way to the second Hook fight, 1 on the halls of the mansion, 7 hits on my way to Hansel and Gretel and in the boss fight itself, and 1 in the beginning of the last split. These hits didn't faze me that much since most of them were easily fixable. After this run, I was feeling myself. On paper, if these hits were the only thing that I had to fix, then getting the run in the next attempt was possible. But then again, that's only on paper. Doing runs for 2 years now, I knew things are never as it seems, so my goal again was to eliminate repeated hits and hope for a PB. This was the results. Oh, 2, 3. Damn, that's scuffed. We gotta practice that. Minor hits here and there. I need to remain sharp to be able to get this run, which is kind of a bit hard because it's 6 hours. And I gotta stay sharp 6 hours and entertain as well. In just 10 days, I managed to lower my PB all the way to 5 hits, which is close to half my previous run. This time, getting hit on 5 splits. At this point, I had several concerns about the consistency of the run and its sections, but nonetheless, I wanted to see how far I can push it, so I went for 2 more runs on the next 2 days. And well, it kinda went as expected. I ended up getting 8 hits on the next run and 9 hits on the run after that. Not only my progress had plateaued, but it also had gotten worse. With only 2 days left before the arrival of Resident Evil Village, my options were pretty limited. Not getting the run was very possible now. We only have 2 days left and I have to work, so I'm not gonna be able to start as early on stream. Wednesday, Thursday. If I won't get the run by Thursday, we're gonna have to postpone the run all the way till I'm done with Village. In the world of no-hit runs, having a run go from +5 hits to a no-hit in a short time frame is not a common thing. So, in attempts to getting a really good chance of getting this run, I made an executive decision that to me was the most important decision I ever made in this journey. I decided to practice the next day and bet it all in one last run. See, the usual thought process would have been to do runs on both days to increase the chances of getting a run, but doing an extra run would have not made the situation better for me. The attempts are there to show you what failures you will find on a run setting so you can tackle them on practice to further improve your next run. I already had my 2 attempts. Having those last 2 runs be that many hits meant that I would be able to cover a lot more ground and eliminate 17 hits that could have occurred on the next run. So it ended up working in my favor. My goal was to eliminate any potential chance of getting hit by the same situations while scouting for future ones so I can lower the chances of getting hit on the next run. So I took a step back, watched all the hits I've gotten so far, and worked on fixing all the issues I encountered so far. At this point, I was able to perform the first half of the game hit list multiple times, so I only needed to work on the second half of the run. Also, the first splits of the second half of the run are also fixed, so I didn't need to work on it either. Just know that Whirlwind Dark Wall combo is just too strong. Come and get it! The path towards Hansel and Gretel, which is the second split and in the beginning of the seventh split, gave me a bit of a problem throughout my journey. The path is the same for both splits, but the enemy placement is different. Since I still didn't have full knowledge of the path, I mixed up spawns and locations, putting me in a very unfortunate scenario. So I mapped out every room and scenario and spent a bit of my time off stream remembering all of it, which fixed everything in this path. On the Mr. Roboto split, there was one issue that I had spotted previously, but didn't try to fix it to prevent the hit, which I admit, it was a bit irresponsible on my part. And due to being irresponsible, it happened. You gotta be kidding me. I actually left because I was afraid of getting hit. My initial strat was to Dark Blast them as they spawned close to me, but the issue was that the lock-on would not target the enemy that was closest, forcing me to leave the spot when pressured by the enemies in front. I did not notice I destroyed one of the enemies in the back, and so it caught me off guard. The fix? Just stay on the other side of the room. I had more space to work with if I needed to retreat, so it made it a lot more safe and consistent. The next boss fight, Wendy, didn't give me that much to work with. The unfortunate hit I had was fixed by just Dark Wall. By the way, any hit that I don't mention was most likely fixed with Whirlwind and Dark Wall. Like I said, it's just too good of a combo. I would say that at this stage of the run, the Wolfpack split was the one that got me concerned the most. And I'm not talking about the actual boss fight. That one was pretty comfy. I'm talking about the mini boss fight that happens before it. The fight is not really difficult to do. All you need is to lower the leader's health all the way down to 50% and the fight is done. The problem came from the 3 puppers chasing me. At any point they could grab me as long as they were close enough without any warning at all. That's what I want to avoid. I had to make sure that I could space them well while dodging the leader's attack in a small arena. And paying attention to all 4 of them was not an easy task. I sat down and tried many strats like Tap Dark Blast on the wolves, which did more damage but was not good enough at holding them off. I also tried Whirlwind Dark Wall combo or using Dark Execution, but nothing seemed consistent. They were either too slow to set up and cast or couldn't keep them all at bay. I played around with this fight so much that I even found this in the process, which was a bit funny yet helpful discovery. Alright, look what I mean now. Watch.
Keep your guard.
There we go. I was about to throw the towel on this one and just hope for the best on my next run for this split. But then I remembered I had one particular move that could auto-target multiple enemies, stagger them, and enter slow-mo when charging it. That move was Charge Dark Blast. I used the same move in the past to ease up the fight on another boss fight with multiple weak spots, and so I tried it. And it worked! I was able to hit all the wolves to keep them away. It took 3 charge shots to finish them off, but thanks to that, I was done with the split and I could move on. As I already explained, the first part of the 7th split was already solved, and while the second part posed a bit of an issue, at the end of the day it was fixed with Whirlwind Dark Wall combo, or Lancing to Execution, which by the way, Lancing to Execution is godsend. Before knowing this, it took way too long to take down heavier enemies. Now, all I do is use Lance to knock them down and then I just execute. If your weapon's damage is good enough, it will kill them in one hit. And if you're wondering what weapon I used for that, I picked Phoenix Sword. I found it before Devil and Popola fight, so there you go. It's in one of the boxes. Now all that was left to work on was on the last boss, the Shadow Lord. On my first practices I ever did on Shadow Lord, I noticed that by locking on and circling clockwise, I was able to dodge all of his projectiles, which is the majority of the fight. After a couple of attempts on practice, the strat felt consistent, so it proved to be a reliable strat. Or at least I thought it was. There were 2 problems that presented itself in this fight that I disregarded. Number 1, Kaine, and number 2, the lock-on feature. Having Kaine fight the Shadow Lord alongside me meant I didn't have full control of the outcome of the fight. So, I did to Kaine the same thing I did to 9S on my Nier Automata run. I made her a pacifist. Now the fight was a one-on-one with no interruptions, and the only thing left was to solve the lock-on situation. Long story short, I wasn't able to solve it. For some reason, when the Shadow Lord jumps at me, I remain locked on the boss, but the camera unlocks itself, making it very difficult for me to consistently circle around him, resulting in hits. This posed a big threat in my eyes, and I didn't want to take any chances and hope for the best with the situation. As a last resort, I did the only thing that would work. I had to get good. I spent the last hours of the day off stream practicing the Shadow Lord, learning all of his moves and projectiles. Thankfully, there wasn't too much to learn. With just a couple of hours of practice, I felt pretty confident about the fight. So, I called it a day, and I took a good rest to prepare for the last run. I was mentally prepared for whatever happened. I was completely okay with not getting the run and just a PB, and working on it when I came back from village. And so, on the next day, this run happened. Come on, baby. Alright, here we go, chat. Here we go, chat.
I have something to defend.
One.
I have a reason to live.
Two. One, two, three. Oh, baby, let's go, dude. Yo, Nier Replicant no-hit run activated. Bros and girls, we did it. Dude, the last day before Village comes out, I managed to go from a 5-hit PB to a no-hit run, achieving the goal that I had set for this run and finishing it in 14 days, just in time before Resident Evil Village came out. To be honest, this was a relief. I didn't have to worry about Replicant while playing Village. With Replicant down, I had my focus completely set on Resident Evil Village. The challenge in Resident Evil was more about the routing than the actual run itself. It doesn't mean that the game was easy, but the way it goes on challenge runs for survival horror is that once you figure out a strat, acquiring and maintaining consistency doesn't take too long. Whereas in platformers or hack and slash games, it's less about the routing and more about developing a mechanical set of skills necessary to maintain consistency. For this one, I was looking to beat Resident Evil Remake 3's record, which is 10 days. And so, once I was done with my first playthrough of Village, it was time to route the game. The first encounter was pretty simple to deal with. I even learned that the lichen retreats if you grab the bolt cutter, so it was even easier. The second encounter was unavoidable. It wasn't a difficult task, but I made sure not to underestimate the lichens' behavior. They can catch you off guard pretty easily. After that, came the siege fight with the lichens, and boy was this stressful. I tried staying in the first house as you enter, the one uphill, on the roof of the same house, camp at the gate, nothing. Nothing seemed to give me a good result. You get a bunch of lichens plus the archers on the roof, and then the leader comes in halfway through. By the way, did I mention that there's no way to make this fight faster? You have to wait 4 minutes for it to end. Unable to find an answer, I continued with the rest of the route and left this issue for later. The beginning of the castle was pretty straightforward all the way to the first sister fight. The sisters had me a bit concerned, especially with Bella's fight because of the little space that I had to avoid her attacks. Not to mention her grabs are pretty crazy, and taking into account that I was trying to conserve the explosive, it made the fight much difficult at first. Later, I found out that I could stagger Bella by shooting her face every time she went for an attack as long as I was standing in front of her. So that's what I did, over and over and over, until I defeated her. After Bella, you have the option to either go to Cassandra in the armory or Daniela in the library. For this route, I chose Cassandra first. The fight was pretty much the same. I used a pipe bomb to open the crack, and this time I set a mine down. There's an attack that Cassandra likes to do after opening the crack, which made it difficult for me to set up the stun lock. Thankfully, the mine that I place interrupts her and allows me to beam her face to stun her to death with my shotgun. Daniela was the easiest one to deal with. All I had to do was pull the lever and spam shots till she's dead. Easy peasy. At this point, I had retrieved 3 masks out of 4 needed to fight Lady D. The last mask I had to retrieve was the Mask of Rage on the roof of the castle. The route is filled with Samse all the way to the mask. There's a bunch of them, so taking them down one by one would take some time and a lot of ammunition. Thankfully, on my playthrough, I played around with these sections a little bit, and I noticed that I could just run past all of them and not get hit. So, I did exactly that. And when entering the room, I crouched to the left corner, waited for them to group up, and the pipe bomb just did the rest. Lady D was one of these bosses that confused me a bit. I wasn't sure how she worked or how close I was to the end of the fight. With some research, I learned that shooting her too much in the beginning was not a good idea. The only trouble I had with this fight was not knowing from what side she will appear, and that cost me some hits. The way I dealt with it was by constantly running to the opposite direction in which I heard her. But the rest was pretty simple. Shoot her with a shotgun and a handgun on land and sniper on air. The last phase didn't pose a threat either. All I did was move to the right before the attack happened, shoot her down, and done. Not too much to worry about. Beneviento is just straightforward gameplay. The section is more of a Visage style of gameplay, so if you do everything right, there's really nothing to worry. On the route to the third lord was surprisingly easy too. I picked the grenade launcher, got past the werewolf, grabbed the keys and ran straight to the boat. Did Moro's part in straightforward fashion and then head directly for the boss fight. Moro gave me some trouble. With a couple of mines and flame rounds, getting him past phase 1 was quick and consistent. The problem was after that. I had the right idea and everything, but the consistency wasn't there. Sometimes he would just come down and I'd trigger the mine, and other times he will trigger the mine but not take the correct path. In the end, it was a back and forth. Things were getting better, but nothing very consistent. So again, I decided to leave it as it is and work on this later. Stronghold, aka Lycan's Lair, was for me the hardest section in the game. You have archers on the high grounds with arrows that can curve and hit you, Lycans popping out of nowhere on your way to the gate on top of a horde fight. Then, after that, there's a bunch of more Lycans waiting inside of the Stronghold. It was just too much to deal with and a lot of ammo that I had to waste. Having no better options at the time, I started killing everything. They can hit you if they are dead, right? I sniped the archers, used shotgun on the rest, worked my way up the gate, and found a nice spot to camp the Lycans while I wait for the gate to open. Once inside, I used Tether to aggro and de-aggro the Lycans for easy kills. Once done with the first wave, I dipped straight for the top, flashed the last group, and I was out of there. The strat seemed somewhat consistent. I didn't have that many problems trying it on practice, but I could definitely tell the potential hits here and there that needed work. And one thing that cost me hits and time on my previous run was not working on potential hits that I encounter on my attempts. This time, I wanted no regrets, so I decided to work on it later as well. The boss fight for this section was pretty easy thanks to flash grenades. Continuously flashing him allowed me to keep him in a staggered state throughout the whole fight, which trivialized the fight. Flash grenades are the MVP of this run, by the way, and you'll see why later. Factory was next. The enemies I had to deal with here were certainly not as scary as dealing with dodgeball fans. At this point, I had a bunch of handgun ammo, so I used it on the Maracas, and used the third shotgun that I bought from the merchant for the sold-out enemies. The mines were also very important in this section. I used them as a failsafe in case sold-out enemies got close to me and I couldn't kill them in time, which happened often. Jet soldiers suffered the same fate unlike the Panzers, where I later decided to pass through them and not waste any of the resources on them. I'm sorry Panzers, you're not that worth it. Now here comes the Sturm fight. My first reaction to this fight was straight sadness. I could see myself losing runs to him. The way that his second phase worked meant that the longer the fight lasted, the harder it could become. I used the first phase to open up the arena. It's just so I can make it easier for second phase. And it worked. Only for the first attempt, that is. The fire trail he leaves lasts for a pretty long time, and if you get bad RNG, it becomes quite difficult to deal with. But then, I remembered that I was armed with the most OP ammo in the game, the flash grenade. So I began to test out flash on him, and my god, it was beautiful. A wall-time flash coupled with my shotgun and magnum, I was able to render him useless throughout the whole fight. And thus, my concerns for this fight completely faded away. Heisenberg was next in line. Probably the only fight that tested my decision making skills. The way I maintain consistency in this fight is by having a set of rules to follow. By using the cannon as utility for creating distance, and my Gatling gun for staggering damage, I was able to beat him hitless pretty consistently, and with that, Heisenberg was out of the worry list. Chris's section wasn't that much of a big deal to route and learn since I already knew how the lichens worked, though the last bit told a different story. Right before the boss, there's a tower that you gotta take down. The way you do it is by charging a laser pointing at the tower to call in an airstrike. Pretty easy, right? Well, not really. To be able to progress past the tower, you have to do it 3 times while fighting off a horde of enemies with armored lichens and archers. It can be pretty rough on a hitless run. On top of that, the laser takes time to recharge, so it kinda felt like Lichen Siege 2.0. The difference here is that I had better tools to deal with them. Pair that with my understanding of how lichens worked, and I devised a strat that allowed me to stall enough time for the laser to be fully charged. I repeated the process a second time, and done deal. The boss fight for this section also looked pretty terrifying to do at first hand. You have a big guy cramped up in a small arena with me. His hammer is capable of covering 90% of the stage, on top of a jump attack that covers any spot. So you probably have an idea on how annoying this fight could get, and yeah, it could have gotten messy. But you know what I had? Yep, you guessed it, the MVP of this game, flashbangs. That, together with all the grenades I saved up, I was able to maintain the boss stagger throughout the whole fight. Another cheese for the books. Now all that was left to tackle and learn was Miranda. Long story short, it sucked. At this point, there were so many questions about this boss that needed answers, like what triggers her to change forms, how her moves work, best weapon combo, can you even stagger her, and why on earth does flashbangs do not work here? Unable to find a consistent strat, I left her for later. Even though she was my biggest concern, I made her last on my priority list. With the routing done, it was time for the attempts, and here's how they looked. First of all, 10 hits on the first attempt is not too shabby, but I knew there were still much more hits yet to be learned. So, the second attempt delivered with 10 more hits. After every attempt, I worked on fixing the hits, getting consistent, and found fixes for most of the sections that I had trouble. Like the first Lichen Siege fight, which was only possible thanks to Carcinogen as the A and Mac the Rock. They spent a good chunk of their time testing out strats and came up with this.
It's like if you play it right, you have an easier time in the later sections, the way I see it.
For Stronghold, I worked closely with Ethereal_Assembly so I could find a better strat. I was not happy with the current strat that I had, and I needed something better. So Ethereal showed me his speed strats, and in Hey Blasty fashion, I adopted some of the speed strats and tweaked it for hitless. At this point, I was 9 days in, and all I needed to fix to have a very consistent run was Miranda. I did manage to get better at the fight, but it was nowhere near consistent as I wanted it to be. So in my search for a light of hope, I came across a hitless fight of Miranda, done by a user named Dax the Animal. He used a mix of mines and pipe bombs to completely skip most of her second phase. It was exactly what I was looking for. Without any hesitation, I tried the strat for myself.
My daughter will be made manifest at last! True, all for this day.
It was way better than what I had. In fact, it was way better than any strat that I found in the internet at the moment. But still, it lacked a bit of consistency.
Why do you interfere? Surely you have no need of Rose now. So close to death.
You piece of shit, man. Alright, so the strat works. Perfecto. That's good. The only issue is that goddamn last attack that she does is the only attack that I can dodge consistently.
While the strat used by Dax was really good, the last part of it was still a bit scary. You see, Dax used a mix of mines and pipe bombs to deal the last bit of damage to Miranda. The problem I had with that was that I wouldn't always place the same number of mines because taking cover was a higher priority for me. That meant that sometimes I was 1 or 2 mines off, making Miranda's choice for the last attack more unpredictable. The way I fixed it was by replacing it with pipe bombs. Using only pipe bombs allowed me to position myself better and have more awareness of the area around me so I could be ready for her last attack. Once all the pipe bombs were thrown, all I needed was to shoot Miranda twice with a magnum to trigger the cutscene. At last, the strat was pretty consistent, and I was feeling pretty confident that I could get the run in any future attempt. With everything fixed, I was ready for another attempt, And so, on the next day, this happened.
Just like we practiced. Let's go.
Fulfilled your purpose, Mr. Winters. You disposed of my false. Now, please do not worry, little Rose. I assure you I'll provide her with truth.
Wait.
Hear my prayer! Now, why won't you? Why do you interfere? Surely
Oh,
you
Jesus.
don't need those now.
That was too close.
This is how
It's not over yet, chat. It's not over yet.
to ensure I never see your face again, I will feed.
It's not over yet. It's not over yet. This is the hard part. This is the hard part. Hey, let's go, dude. Resident Evil Village, no hit, no damage. Activated!
My daughter! My Ava!
Single segment, no saves. Let's go. In only 10 days after the release of Village, I was able to get my no-hit run breaking even with my previous record on Resident Evil 3 Remake. Not an improvement from the previous, but considering the fact that it's a longer game, I'd say we take those, don't you think? And with that, I managed to get Nier Replicant and Resident Evil Village no-hit run in only 24 days. Less than a month, which is pretty crazy. After this, I'm definitely taking it slow, though it doesn't mean that I will stop going for no-hit runs. So if watching a chat go at it at games and beat them hitless interests you, then go on Twitch and type Hey Blasty in the search bar to find me, or click on the link in the description to take you directly to my channel. I will also leave the link of our Discord so you can be part of the community. We foster an inspiring community looking to better themselves as a player. Lastly, don't forget to slay that thumb button and share your thoughts below with a comment about this journey that transpired. Thank you for your time, play safe, be safe, and as always, keep on slaying.